Poverty in spirit consists in having the sovereign freedom from everything that is the delight of man, and for which man goes to the extent of committing material crime, or the unpunished moral crime that too often escapes human law, but does not make fewer victims. On the contrary, it makes more, and with consequences which are not limited to taking the life of the victim, but often deprive both the victim and their relatives of their good reputation and livelihood. The man poor in spirit is no longer enslaved by riches. Even if he does not go so far as to repudiate them materially, depriving himself of them and of every comfort by joining a monastic order, he knows how to use them sparingly for himself, which is a double sacrifice, in order to be prodigal of gifts to the poor of the world. He has understood my sentence: make friends by means of unjust riches. Of his money, which might be the enemy of his spirit, leading it to lust, greed, and anti-charity, he makes a servant that levels the way to heaven for him. The rich, poor in spirit, a way completely spread with his mortifications and his charitable deeds for the miseries of his fellow creatures. How many injustices the man poor in spirit mends and cures. His own injustices of the time when, like Zacchaeus, he was but a greedy, hard-hearted man. Injustices of his neighbours, whether alive or dead. Social injustices. You erect monuments to people who were great only because they were overbearing. Why do you not erect monuments to the secret benefactors of destitute mankind, to the poor and working classes, to those who use their wealth, not to make their own lives a perpetual feast, but to make life brighter, better, and more elevated for those who are poor, for those who suffer, for those whose functional faculties are impaired, for those left in ignorance by overbearing people, because ignorance serves their hateful aims better. How many there are, also among those who are not rich, nay, who are little less than poor. And yet they can sacrifice the 2 farthings they possess in order to relieve a misery which, being without the light which they have, and their behaviour makes one understand that they do have it, is greater than their own. Those are poor in spirit, who, losing their possessions, whether large or small, know how to keep their peace and hope, without cursing or hating anyone, either God or men. The wide category of the poor in spirit, which I mentioned as the first one, because I could say that without such freedom of the spirit from all the delights of life, it is not possible to have the other virtues which give beatitude, is divided and subdivided into many forms. Humility of thought, which does not swell with pride and does not proclaim itself superthought, but makes use of the gift of God, acknowledging its origin for good, only for that. Generosity in affections, whereby one can deprive oneself also of them in order to follow God, also of life, the most real wealth, and the most loved instinctively by the animal creature. All my martyrs were generous in that way, because their spirits had become poor in order to become rich in the only eternal riches, God. Justice in loving our personal things. It is our duty to love them, because they are testimony of providence in our favour. I have already spoken about that in previous dictations. But we must not love them more than we love God or his will. You must not love them to the extent of cursing God if man snatches them from you. And finally, I would repeat it, freedom from the slavery of money. Those are the different forms of that spiritual poverty that I said will possess heaven out of justice. Put under your feet all the fleeting riches of human life to possess the eternal riches. Consider the earth and its deceitful fruit, which is sweet outside and bitter inside, as the last thing, and live, working to conquer heaven. Oh, there is no fruit there with a false flavour. There is the ineffable fruit of the enjoyment of God. Zacchaeus had understood that. That sentence was the arrow that opened his heart to light and charity. It opened it to me as I approached him to say to him, "Come." And when I came up to him to call him, he was already poor in spirit. He was therefore capable of possessing heaven.